In this review of the week's news, time's running out for residents to have their say on Sarah's transition plan. It's a special week for those who fought in Vietnam half a century ago, and they're still chugging along. Model trains excite all in North Canterbury. This is CTV News Week in Review. I'm Jared McCulloch. Regenerate Christchurch, the new entity to take over from Sarah, doesn't take effect until next year, but the government has only given residents until the end of the month to make submissions and have their say on the city's future. But is enough being done?
Do you believe you should have a say in the future of our city?
That's what Rebuild Christchurch's Dion Swiggs is asking in a new online video, a push to get Canterburyans to have their say.
I actually had a dream about how can we engage people, get people involved, interested in actually our city. And then I thought, well, what's a better way than writing an article? I do some writing and things like that, but that's what everybody else is doing. And so a video was a good way to start that conversation.
So he got his camera out and produced a nearly 3-minute long video alongside local broadcaster Chris Lynch to give an insight into the new plan of Regenerate Christchurch and what Canterburyans can do to get their voice heard.
Should the government have all the say in the future use of the residential red zone land? And who should lead the engagement of what happens here?
Earlier this month, the government announced plans to close the doors for Sarah and create a new organisation, Regenerate Christchurch, a move to eventually give total power back to the council in 5 years' time. But the public only has a month to put a submission forward, and Dion says it's confusing and people need more time.
It took me a whole week to actually understand what it meant. It took me a whole week to get what the recovery plan is about, or the transitional plan and the advisory board and the cabinet notes, and actually to understand that it's too complicated. And that's why I had to take a step back and go, well, what really is going on? What really matters? And what really matters is actually showing interest in the city.
The online video, Do You Care About Christchurch, urges Canterburyans to stand up and be counted following the government's new transition, which will take effect next year. And Dion says it's been quite a challenge to get those people to submit, nearly 5 years on from the first earthquake.
So many people were saying to us, oh, we're just too tired, or the government's not listening, or we don't care, just do what needs to be done. That's great, and that is the attitude of many people. But we cannot have that attitude right now. We actually need to stand up and actually be counted for.
The clip has been seen by nearly 10,000 people on YouTube, only being up since Monday. But there have been more viewers and comments made on different social media platforms.
And so far we've had over 40,000 views of the video. Hopefully that'll get up to around 60, which means 60,000, which means we've actually targeted the right audiences.
Swiggs has been keeping a track on the rebuild of Christchurch right from the very start in the first earthquake in September 2010. And through his website, there's a large following of locals on social media with regular information keeping the public informed about the rebuild's progress. And he says now is more important than ever for Canterburyans to have their say about the transition plan.
It really takes a stand around what our city is and how we're going to take this next stage of the recovery.
A similar process was set up called Share an Idea, making up the 100-day Christchurch blueprint in 2012, but people never had a chance to voice their opinion.
We didn't actually get any chance to consult on that blueprint plan for the central city. There was no hearing, nothing afterwards. It was just, this is what we're doing and we're going to do it. Now we have a chance, this is the first time since then, to actually say maybe potentially around, well, we don't like that idea, or this is different now.
And he says now's the time to take a stand and be heard.
If we don't have that same impact this time around, then the next 5 years are going to be around, well, there's not that mandate for people wanting to be involved in the city, and that's just not acceptable. What is actually worse? Is it a government that we think that doesn't listen, or a government that we think doesn't listen and that doesn't think we care about our own city? And that's really the message that we're trying to get across.
The submission date closes in 2 weeks' time and can be made to Sarah on their website. Jared McCulloch, CTV News. Burial space in Banks Peninsula is getting harder to find, and locals are now asking the council to find more land in Littleton and Akaroa. Room to bury loved ones in Akaroa is proving difficult, with plots being filled and no space for the dead. The Akaroa Wairero Community Board members are concerned about the lack of burial space in Akaroa cemeteries, with the group putting forth a submission to the long-term plan hearings last month. The board wanted the Christchurch City Council to review their cemeteries master plan, adopted back in 2013 to find a way to keep loved ones at home in Akaroa.
We've got no space other than prepaid plots and second interments left in Akaroa, and that's in all of the cemeteries that have been identified in the cemeteries master plan.
And it's not just Akaroa with limited plots, but Littleton is having the same problems.
To the two Littleton cemeteries, which are more or less full, I think, and there was a new cemetery built in Diamond Harbour that was supposed to take a lot of interments going into the future, but it's been found that there are drainage issues, and I think there's a project in the long-term plan somewhere to address that.
The plan looks at all the cemeteries around the city, identifying a number of areas for burial spaces and what should be done. But Richard Sincere's time is running out.
We did some time ago ask for a review of the Cemetery Master's Plan. It was adopted in 2013, and a reply that we had, it was not due for review. We're quite happy to get together as a community and find a solution that would be appropriate to allow our members of our community to continue to rest where they want to, and that's Akaroa. They don't want to go to devotionals, they don't want to go to Wainui. You want to rest where you choose to want to be.
However, Councillor Glenn Livingston says there's more and more cremations these days than burials, and questions whether or not it's a top priority at this stage. However, Richardson says that's not the case.
It continues to be critical for Akaroa. We have not that I'm aware of any special area for ashes, and that certainly people are still requesting burials.
Anne Smith believes the location of a burial is important.
People do want to be buried or have their ashes kept in the community they lived and belonged, and I'm not sure that the Cemeteries Master Plan enables that for all communities.
A plan has been put in place, but it doesn't target the issue around space and finding areas to lay those to rest.
The conservation plan is about more about heritage and looking after those cemeteries in that sort of vein, rather than having plots and areas available.
And the community board has some ideas.
But there may be ways that we could perhaps look at a wall that's put in somewhere, tidy up the cemetery, remove some of the old vegetation that is a bit scruffy, and just look at the best way of providing an area for further burials.
The council will now look into the issue, with the local body having the legal obligation to make sure there is enough space. Jared McCulloch, CTV News. They started out as a car club, but now they're also looking after those in the community who like a good drive. And this week it was no different. Here's Chelsea Daniels.
The Canterbury Land Rover Owners Club got down and dirty this morning. Despite the name, membership is open to all makes of four-wheel drive vehicles with capabilities similar to the Land Rover. Chairman Dave Lockett says if you're able to handle the terrain, you're welcome to get on board.
The club's open to any make that's got similar capabilities to Land Rovers, with high-low ratio gearboxes, and if they want to come along and join us on trips and stuff like that, they can join the club.
The boys took their toys out today and got local charity All Star Kids involved. The club runs school holiday programs for special needs kids and have been for quite some time now.
Today we're doing our what we call the All Star Kids program, which is special needs children. We'll meet them down the river shortly, and we take them for a ride. We do it at every school holidays, in the second week of the school holidays. Every Wednesday, it's pretty much locked in the calendar. And they love the sensation of the rocking and the splashing, and so we've been doing that for about 15 years now.
The club enjoys four-wheel drive trips, which vary between one-day local trips to week-long camping trips in more remote locations.
We grade our trips from 1 to 5, 1 being very simple, very limited amounts of damage or minimal damage, and then going right through to 5 where you just quite easy to bust your truck. So it's really, we tend to cater possibly more towards family.
Even though there were a few minor slip-ups. The trip went relatively hassle-free, and Dave says going in a group prevents major accidents from happening.
A lot of the tracks are quite well established in some places now, so you can see where the real tracks come out, and so you can make your line and head through there. So it's all just...
I see what you mean. You can see that's quite clear water.
Yeah, so you can see how deep it is. Sometimes you can see that that's quite clear, but it could be very, very soft. I mean, this shingle here is always very soft. you may not feel it in the passenger seat, but when you're driving, you can feel your truck trying to claw its way through. When you're in a group like this, you can see how other trucks are reacting and where the line they're picking, and 9 times out of 10 you can save yourself a lot of grief just by following the leader, really.
Active membership currently stands at around 175 members and was formed in 1966, where Life member David Harris attended the very first meeting.
The members are just up to about 1,200 now, so there's been a lot of members right throughout the whole time.
And what's your membership number?
7. There was 7 people at the first meeting, and so I finished up with number 7.
The Harris family have seen 3 generations enter the club, with David being the only one left standing.
Well, I've had 3 sons that have all had 4-wheel drives, and they've all been in, and they're now all out. And I've had 1 grandson. He was a member for a wee while, and he's pulled out too. So I'm the only one that's actually still a member of the family.
Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
Still to come, 50 years after the Vietnam War started, a veteran talks about his experience. Welcome back. Her hospitality business in Oxford is no more. But what is next for Jo Seager? Chelsea Daniels reports.
Well, she's been an icon in North Canterbury for decades, but now her cafe and cooking school business will be no more. Jo Seager spoke to us today in regards to her hospitality business, and she says the debt just caught up.
It's just very bad timing that, the debt kind of caught up with us because, businesses actually has been in the last few months really back to pre-quake times. So that is a great sadness.
She has said trade downturn following the earthquakes is the reason why it went into liquidation recently.
Well, I think, Canterbury was just so low on visitors. I think the statistics were 1.5 million tourists down or something. And we just noticed overnight our income dropping below half. And I know myself, I didn't want to go out while all those earthquakes were shaking, and we didn't know if it was going to be 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month. No one had any idea it would be a couple of years and 11,000 shakes. And people just weren't going out. Certainly tourists weren't coming past. There was nowhere in Christchurch, no accommodation, and besides, having a look at the earthquake damage, people were just not putting Canterbury on their tourist map.
Seager has said she owes a hefty tax bill to the IRD, but hopes to be able to pay it off if the liquidators get market value for selling her business. So, what's next for this cooking icon?
I'm certainly staying in Oxford. Ross and I are very involved locally. He's a senior fireman with the Volunteer Fire Brigade, and I'm very involved in the community and got lots of friends here, made lifelong friends through the cook school and cafe. So Oxford's home. So that's definitely how it is in the meantime. And we'll just see. I haven't really, I've got, my writing. I write articles for Australian Women's Weekly and write recipes, and I'm patron of hospice in New Zealand, so I do a lot of work, voluntary work around the country for them. So I've got plenty of things to keep me busy, and I take my cooking tours. So all of those things carry on. It's just that the cafe as we know it is no longer. Just have to sit tight. But as soon as I think of the next great idea, I'll let you know.
Chelsea Daniels, CTV News.
It's a special week for those who served in Vietnam, with Wednesday marking the day New Zealanders first fought against the North Vietnamese 50 years ago. And for one Cantabrian, the memories are just as strong as ever. On this day 50 years ago marks the first battle of New Zealand troops in the Vietnam War, with this country working alongside the United States and Australia. And Edward Gorman says it doesn't feel like that long at all.
Not really. It doesn't seem that long because there's always something that jogs your memory, whether it's on the television or radio or whatever.
Edward is 80 years old. He lives with his wife Irene in a small flat in Christchurch, but his journey doesn't start here. This is a bit of a love story. Edward grew up in Wolverhampton in the UK, and at the age of 17 he wanted to travel the world. And the best way back in the day was to join the armed forces, but he was too young, wanting to go to Korea. So after trying and trying, he jumped on a boat and headed to Singapore, working in the support crew in Malaya, where he met the love of his life, Irene.
We supplied food to the orphanages and places like that, and they were grateful, but it was never enough, We could never do enough, you see, because there was a lot of things going on.
But he had to go back to the UK and couldn't afford to see Irene again. However, they met up many years later, got married, had children, and have been together ever since. Then Vietnam started. He was told,
"Don't expect to go to Vietnam because you needed here more and you'll be staying here, And it wasn't a few months later on, I was called in again for an interview with the company commander, and he said to me, "Gorman, you're going to Singapore, pack your things, and tell your wife and your family you'll be going in a week's time."
So he went and served there for just over a year, from October 1969 to November 1970, an experience he'll never forget.
A lot of people got hurt, and soldiers say, they want to go over to a place like Vietnam and fight and do this, but it's not all about fighting. There's a lot of other things involved in wars, and there's people, there's children, there's grown-ups, there's aged people. Everybody's involved. You can't go into a war and not get involved. You have to try and do your best under the circumstances.
He arrived on the shores of Vietnam a few years after 1965, when the first New Zealand troops fought, aged 35. He took care of the soldiers by cooking food as a chef, but he and everyone else also served there for one purpose: to fight.
Now, whether you liked it or not, this was your main role. And if you had to pick up a gun, you had to pick up a gun, You didn't go over there to become a chef, and think that, you're not going to get near, you're not going to get hurt. A lot of the corps personnel that was over there supporting the infantry did actually go out on patrols with the infantry and did do what was needed or necessary.
After 50 years, he says it's hard to look back on.
You never achieve anything by war. That's a sad part about it, Wars are just a necessity for people who want to create havoc among other people.
After Vietnam, he moved to New Zealand with his family.
I went back to the camp in Singapore. I did, to the New Zealand Regiment's camp, and I was then. I had about 2 or 3 weeks holiday, and I was put on a plane with the family back to New Zealand.
Now retired, he stays active and plays a bit of golf, but he doesn't regret anything.
I wouldn't change it, never change it, not for anything. My life's been good, not all the time has the army been, how to put it, a place that I'd, sometimes you get the feeling, I wish I was out of here, But at the end of the day, the army has been good to me. These wars that we've been having and everything else that goes with violence, it should never happen, But there's no way you're going to stop that, Maybe one day somebody will come up with something, but I don't think it's going to happen in the future.
It's a day to remember for Edward, 50 years on. Jared McCulloch, CTV News. Still to come, 2 words: model trains. Welcome back. Now for this week's feature story. Modern technology was put to one side for kids in North Canterbury as a group of keen train enthusiasts showcased their large collection of model gear. The tracks and engines were tucked away for years, but a new club has recently formed to bring excitement to people of all ages.
Here we go.
Trains, trains and more trains. You would have had to be living under a rock not to know this iconic theme song. Thomas the Tank Engine has been beaming into children's homes for over 30 years. And it's not just the young ones who are fans.
This one here has been running for, 16 years now. Hasn't changed.
This is Arthur. He's train mad, steam engines being his favourite.
That's character. Those engines had character. They had a personality. But there's no glamour in them now. They're all diesel.
And model trains have always been a part of his life.
married, had a family, and they wanted to train, so I set up a train for them, and then they got tired of it, and then I carried on, then I dropped it for a while, and then 30 years later start again.
He's helped start up the Rangiora and North Canterbury Model Railway Club. They're celebrating their 1-year anniversary in September. It's one terrific train track wonderland put together alongside his trusty assistants for children to enjoy. They've set up here at the public library for the last week or so, but it wasn't an easy task.
I was told because we're not art and craft society people, we couldn't. However, the gentleman did tell a lady at the library, a librarian, about the idea, and sat down and we talked about it, and within half an hour we came up with the fact, right, we'll bring Thomas in here and we'll show children how to make buildings and do a layout.
He spends a lot of time building and constructing the island of Sodor, creating everything by hand, and then passing on that knowledge to the kids. Bits and bobs here and there, all the trees and plants, sheds and stations, all made from recycled materials from out and about and around the home. His ideas are endless.
Walk along the beach and pick up some seaweed, and you make little bushes out of seaweed.
These silos are made from empty toilet paper rolls, the sheds are from old cracker containers, and the green on the trees, well, it's a coating of green sawdust.
We show them how to make buildings out of scrap, biscuit boxes, for example, recycled cardboard that we get, and also free printouts you can get off the internet.
This is Kevin. He's a member of the club. He's making some small-scale shrubs.
I'm not going to throw them away because I'm going to put them back on again, but I'm going to bunch them up so that they go nice and tight. I started model railroading when I was 8. I'm now 72 and I haven't stopped yet.
The club started with just 9 members. Now, nearly 12 months on, around 24 have jumped on board.
When you sit down in the back corner there and look over this way and see the faces and the concentration, hand-to-eye coordination, and bringing a train into the station and slowing down, stopping and then going again, they get quite keen about that. And this is what it's about.
Arthur says they like to mix it up here and there, changing the carriages around with the other trains, but the kids keep them in check.
There's Gordon, there's Percy, and there's carriages, Annabelle and Clarabelle and so on. And if you put the wrong carriage on the wrong train, the kids will tell you.
You've been told off a couple of times.
Don't do it.
There's Thomas again. I can see Thomas again.
Sometimes Thomas slows down and has a talk to Stephanie. I think he's very fond of Stephanie.
Ooh, scandal. And after the young ones have had their turn, they don't leave empty-handed.
We give them a certificate signed by the Fat Controller as being a qualified model engine driver. And they go away with something, they're happy.
Don't worry about the
all for 50 cents. You couldn't even buy an ice cream for that.
I'm a big fan of Thomas the Tank Engine, and Seb, our cameraman, has set me a challenge to see if I can name all these trains in here. So we've got Percy, Diesel, James, Thomas, Duck, and Ben. There we go. It's great I can remember that. If only I could remember when to put out the wheelie bin at home. Sorry, flatmates. This is fantastic. Yes, I was a fanatic too when it came to Thomas the Tank Engine, watching it on VHS over and over again. Here's me kitted out in what was really a uniform when I was young. And since I was on my best behaviour, I got to sit alongside those training to be a train driver, number 454. And once I work out which track I'm operating, I'm ready to go. And lucky for me, I graduated. This is what I'll be doing tonight. This is what I'll be doing when I get home.
What you do this afternoon?
Oh, you're there? Yeah, at work at some stage? Shh, don't tell anyone. However, Arthur hopes the club can do more events like this, travelling around Canterbury to let everyone enjoy what was once his childhood toys.
Be involved with the community, and we're a club what I call on the right track. There's no doubt about that. Yep.
No pun intended.
No pun intended, no. We're steaming ahead.
It really does show you don't always have to grow up. Jared McCulloch, CTV News. And that is CTV News Week in Review. I'm Jared McCulloch. Have a fantastic weekend.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.